Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with media personality, author, and visionary futurist Steve Truitt. He is a visionary futurist and author of The Deletion, the first installment of the MindSet Chronicles. With an unwavering passion for space, science, and science fiction, Steve envisions a future where untapped technologies hold the power to both uplift and challenge humanity. After 2 award-winning decades on radio and television, Steve now captivates audiences with a glimpse into the world where technology and AI intertwines minds and shapes societies. Steve served as a Los Angeles TV news anchor and hosted the acclaimed science and technology programs such as NatGeo's The Human Edge and Discovery Channel's Cool Stuff, How It Works. His presence extends to the realm of future tech expos and even includes a notable appearance on Star Trek Enterprise. Following a determined letter-writing campaign, he's full of great stories. Enjoy this interview. Steve, thank you for taking a minute out today.
It's my pleasure. Great to be here.
So before we get into your life as a visionary futurist and author, how did you survive the pandemic the last 4 years? How did you get through it and how did it change you?
I actually got lucky, Joe. I was between jobs. I was put on furlough in my previous job as a training director for a large company. And I had about 8 weeks off and I just started to write the novel I've always wanted to write. My kids were getting older. And I finished it within the first draft, within the first 8 weeks. And then I was recruited by another company and went to that company. And so just that little 8-week spurt back in March of 2020 through the summer gave me the opportunity to literally follow my dreams, even this late in life. And then even when I got my new job, I was able to continue working on my books. And so for me, I got really lucky, actually.
So let's get a better handle on exactly what you do for a living. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
So I help people do better in their jobs. I bring out the best in them. So whenever anyone is struggling with maybe leading others, I teach them how to be a better leader. If they're struggling with how to write a good email, I teach them how to write a good email. I let people be their best selves when they're at work, and that's my job.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
Well, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I didn't think I was smart enough. And I convinced myself of that early on. So I just became a fan of space. And then I just decided to get into theater because I was a short kid and I liked girls, but the girls didn't like me. But I just knew for a fact that I'd have a better chance in the theater than in sports. So I got into plays and stuff in high school and then college, and then it led me to television, and I had a 20-year television career.
So talk to me a little bit about that time in TV. How did that lend to you being a writer now and kind of how life has unfolded for you now?
Good question, Joe. I think I've always been a writer. I've always written things. Even when I started work out of college in New York, I was writing within my public relations company, the first job I ever had, working for a public relations company. I came out to Los Angeles to be a broadcaster, started getting TV work as a host. But I always wrote my segments or changed my segments. And then, I had a good 20-year career on camera. It was a lot of fun. But then the business changed, especially locally in LA, and they didn't want an older guy like me. They liked young girls, because they were cheaper and better looking. So I said, okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and do my second love, which is training. And I got into training and I even wrote all my training stuff. So I've always been a writer, even though I've been in front of people.
So talk to me a little bit about the very beginnings of your life. You're obviously, you're very driven. You're very comfortable in front of the camera and putting your world out there. How did these seeds get planted in you to grow into who you are today?
I attribute it to, and this is the truth, NASA's space exploration and Star Trek. When I was a kid, 3 years old, my mother put me in front of the TV. This is how old I am. And she showed me the Apollo 11 launch live. And I asked her, what is that thing? And she said, that's a rocket. It's going to the moon and it's taking 3 people with it. And they're going to go land on the moon. And I remember that moment just thinking, my God, how incredible. Later on, I discovered Star Trek in reruns and just fell in love with sci-fi, but realistic sci-fi, and the dream of a not no so much a utopian future, but one that where humans had flaws, but they're trying as hard as they could, and that just resonated with me. Like we're all flawed, but we're doing the best we can, and so even my novels now that I'm writing have that element to them, grounded in reality, lots of flaws, but we're doing our best.
So, who was your favorite reporter growing up? Who was the favorite TV anchor or reporter that you looked up to?
Tom Brokaw at first because I met him in Minnesota. I guess it was 1976. He's from there, Minneapolis. I went to go visit my grandparents when I was 10, and he was the head of I think they called it the Sesquicentennial Parade. And I met him, and he was so charming, and he was a young fellow back then. I've always just loved him. He's of the greatest generation. He reminds me of my grandparents. He's just a smart guy. Um, and then later on, I fell in love with hosts. So I think Aisha Tyler is probably one of the best hosts I've ever seen. Chris Hardwick, I love people who are just unabashedly themselves. Jenny McCarthy, when she was hosting, loved her too. Just fun and real in front of the camera, not scared or trying to read a teleprompter.
So, overall in your life, who's been kind of a hero and overall inspiration for you?
It's a good question. So I've had a lot. But I would say that, and this may come out of left field too, Orson Welles, I fell in love with in 1985 when I discovered Citizen Kane in a film class in college. I'd never heard of it before. I guess maybe I heard of it, I never saw it. And I just became obsessed with Orson Welles. The thing I love about him was that he started at 16 after the death of his dad, and he moved to London and became part of the stage out there and absolutely loved Shakespeare and just took control of his life. And he was enigmatic and incredible and a leader from day one, and went to Hollywood and made Citizen Kane, and just he had a struggle to be the man that he needed to be to make the films he wanted to make. And a lot of people didn't like him and didn't understand him. But I just found him to be a genius and well-spoken, and he loved life. And I didn't necessarily always follow his example, but I just loved the man that he was. He inspired me a lot.
So, if there of everybody that's alive right now on the planet, if you could meet one person that you find inspirational, who would it be? Someone you could meet, interview, talk to? Who would that be?
I'm lucky in that I've met a lot of my heroes, and they always say don't meet your heroes. But I think I would love to sit down with Barack Obama. I would like to interview him solely on the basis of you were the first of your kind uh, in a very difficult position, and I just want to know what that was like, the good and the bad. You had a lot of negative against you, you had a lot of positive. What an interesting life you've led. I'd like to have a beer with him and play some basketball.
Yeah, I'm listening to Michelle Obama's book right now, and she's just getting into when they met and how whimsical and sandal wearing and just how he was. You
Yeah,
know,
I listened to that book too, hers and his, and I
yeah,
was very impressed with both of them. They're good people.
yeah, they certainly are. They certainly are. So, at the end of the day, you have motivations to get up every day. What is that motivation for you to excel, to be you, and to ultimately evolve as a person?
Joe, it comes down to one word: choice. I believe that we didn't choose our life. We didn't choose our parents. We didn't always choose the struggles that were given to us. But we do have the power of choice to wake up every day and to choose powerfully your day. So that's what I try to do. I get up, and the first thing I do is I choose my wife day after day after day. I choose you powerfully. I love you. I think that's key to a marriage. I choose my life. I have chosen my path. I was lucky enough to have that 8-week furlough, which finally said to me, hey man, you can do anything you want. I wrote my book. I choose my job powerfully. I choose my children powerfully. And I do it knowing that they're flawed and that they have issues and they might drive me nuts, but I choose it anyway. And I think that's what sustains me, is just getting through these things by saying, I choose this. I will never complain about what I choose.
So, of all of the things that you've done up to this point in your life, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Well, I'm going to say my children, but that's a slam dunk. So I'm going to push that aside because that's first and foremost. The thing I'm most proud of was I was able to escape a family system on the East Coast that was kind of like Succession. Like, you have to stay in the family. You don't talk about the family. You serve the family, do what the family does. And I just said, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I moved all the way across the country to California and pursued my goal of broadcasting. I was successful in it for 20 years. I had a fantastic career. And I'm really proud of saying no to a system that didn't serve me.
The one thing we hear about, the media always gets a bad rap about, when it bleeds, it leads, and we're the ones that create the fire and all this, that, and the other. What's your take on that argument of what a good journalist does and what our function is and how it's operating in this 2024 America?
Great question, Joe. And I'm glad you asked that, because I was a journalist in that I was a breaking news journalist. So I'm not sure I would even call myself a journalist, but I've been around a lot of news people, especially in Los Angeles. And here's what I know for sure. These folks are hardworking. They check their stories, and for the most part, are accountable for their stories. Now, there are some news producers that might rush things out. That's a producer. I believe good reporters, and I think there's a majority of them, really care about the story and want to get it right. And that's why you see so few retractions in media. People will say, oh, mainstream media, all they do is lie. It's not true. If that was the case, they'd be sued every 5 minutes. The New York Times, the LA Times, any paper will always print retractions, even if they get spelling wrong or the title of someone's business, right? So it's hard for me to sit here and watch people disparage good media folk who really do care about getting the story right, when there are a few bad apples who just care about ratings. And so it's disappointing to me, but I believe very strongly in the media. And that's why they call it mainstream media, because they serve a majority of the public, and a majority of the public believe what they're doing.
I'm going to bring up my next point, not because I want to get into a political rabbit hole, but I had an epiphany the other night about Donald Trump. And as much as he dislikes the media and talks about how he doesn't like them, I realized in a headline the other day, whether this is 100% true or not, it said that most people that will vote for him aren't aware of the legal woes that he's going through. And then I started thinking, I used to listen to NPR and I miss it, and that kind of style of reporting. And I literally haven't listened to it because of the circus that all of this has turned into. And I think the thing about Donald Trump that's genius of the way he does it is he is a master at provocation and bending the story in his direction. So for the rest of us that get fatigued by this, we aren't paying attention, and the people that's his base have no idea that this is happening. It almost seems like a formulaic ingredient mix that is going to perpetuate whatever he politically wants to try to get done.
I think that's a great revelation. I think you're spot on. And I want to add to that. Don't forget that the man who calls the enemy of the people, the media, used mainstream media for 2 years before he got elected. He was on every show. He was calling the Today Show every morning. He was using the New York Times. He was using all these media outlets that he disparaged as soon as think about that. He was calling them every day, talking to them, putting his stuff out there, lying, of course. And then as soon as he gets elected, he calls them liars. That's an evil genius tactic to say, hey, now that I'm president, no matter what I do, they're going to criticize me, of course, because he knew it was wrong. And so he had to make them evil. And it's a shame because the media let it happen, because they treated Trump like he was an ordinary person, and no one thought he was going to get elected. And so unfortunately, that's where I'm talking, where the producers failed, was letting him come on and lie, and because no one thought he was going to get elected.
Yeah,
but I think now mainstream viewers know exactly who he is. And those are the people. It was the 10% in Wisconsin, 4% in Illinois, whoever tipped him over in 2016, there's no way he can get elected again, because everybody now knows his deal.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that younger version of you getting ready to embark on a big journey to the West and to go through this risk. and the fears and all of those things, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained throughout all these decades, what advice would you impart on that young version of you?
Very easy. Trust your gut. I didn't learn to trust my gut until I was 50. I was raised to not listen to my inner voice, to, like I mentioned before, serve the family, serve the master. And so even though I broke free and moved out here, the first person I met who had any influence on me said, "Hey, listen, no one takes you seriously in this town until you're 30. And I was 25. And I thought, okay, great. I'll just mess around for 5 years. I'll work in radio and then I'll start being serious. Well, that's a waste of 5 years where I could have really pushed and gotten into the business and gotten even more entrenched as a TV personality and a host. And I might have had a different career as a result of it. And so this is a message I give to my children and anyone who will listen. The first voice you have is always the right one. And so you have to listen to it, period. Don't listen to anybody. Even if you think they've got your best interest in mind, they're still, I guess, tainted by their own personal view. So that's the advice I would give. I don't know if I would have listened to it, but I would have given the advice.
That's the caveat.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we're in Kansas City and we're all swept up in this Super Bowl hoopla, which is so
Yeah.
nice because of this political divided world we live in. We can all
Yeah.
agree on one thing, and it's just so good to see downtown bathed in red and just
Yeah.
all of that. But I take I since I was a kid, I went to training camp, and I've always watched them when they were nothing in the dark years. And now they're in St. Joseph, Missouri, and it's the college that Walter Cronkite went to. And I always go by and
Mm,
see the Walter Cronkite School, and this is where it all began. And how many seminal moments that he spent in that anchor chair
yeah.
telling us that Kennedy was lost and all of these
Right.
things. What's
Yeah.
the one story, if you could go back in time historically, what would be one story you would love to have broken on the air?
Well, I think you mentioned the Kennedy one. But I don't think I would have done as much justice as Mr. Cronkite did, simply because here's a man who was so journalistically perfect that even in his despair, he forgot to put his jacket on. What a moment. He was so distraught. It was a moment in the country that shifted. And I, as a journalist, don't think I could have done it justice as he did. He was so stoic and brilliant. So I think the next big event would have been the moon landing, which I think I could have reported on with some skill. And I would have loved to have reported on that. I'm a big fan of Everyday Astronaut. If you haven't looked him up, or if you're a SpaceX fan or an astronaut fan, look him up, Everyday Astronaut. His name is Tim Dodd. He's just a regular guy like you and me, and he reports on SpaceX activities and does live stuff. I'm a huge fan of his, but the only thing I would change about him is that every time he reports on something live, he just sits there and goes, "Wow, wow." And I go, "No, Tim, describe the moment, feed it to us like you're a sportscaster." But that's who he is. And so, I'm an old school guy.
So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, you're you've been seen in all kinds of different lights and in different levels of your career, but
Mm.
ultimately you drive the ship.
Yeah.
You got family, friends, fans, everybody that knows you. What is your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
At this point, I am the conductor of the train. And I like that because while not a control freak, there's a great um, solace in knowing that every choice I make, and I go back to choice, is my own. Even if I fall on my face, I will not regret it because I made the choice. I was not influenced by anybody else. I'm driving the train. I'm stoking the coals. I'm hitting the brakes when I need to. I used to ride in the caboose and be told what to do and listened and trusted everyone but myself. And so I'm very happy with where my life is right now. I've chosen an incredible woman to be with. I have beautiful children. My career's good. I like being an author. I like talking to you. I like talking to other people. So I'm in a good spot.
So the Deletion is your book, and
Hmm.
if anyone out there wants to pick this up, learn more about you, reach out, anything about your world, where's the best place to go?
Well, go to Amazon first. Look it up, either The Deletion or Steve Truitt. We hit bestseller status when it came out. It's won an award at the Book Fest, Gold Award. I'm very proud of that. I think you'll like it. It's more techno thriller than sci-fi. Tom Clancy was a huge fan. Excuse me, I was a huge fan of Tom Clancy, and so I write in that style. And the second book comes out in May. It's called The Spill, which is the sequel. Also on Amazon.
Wonderful, Steve. This has been so illuminating. Thank you so much for your time, your story. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Joe, thank you. Thanks for your time. It was nice to talk to you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.